I would like to present my analysis and understanding of Palestinian literature through examples of work by renowned Palestinian poets and authors. For some background, Palestinians are known amongst their fellow Arabs as well as around the world for the art of their resistance and the strength in their struggle. A strength that Palestinians share with the rest of the Arab world is the Arabic language. It is said that when a people lose their language, they lose their blood and their bond. The Arabic language, as well as Arab people, are known historically to be artistic and very passionate. Arab poetry has been dated back to before the 9th century, in the early days of the Islamic Empire, where it flourished and is still encouraged to this day. While traditionally Palestinian resistance has been led and targeted to the youth of Palestine, literature and the arts appeal to an international audience. Arts are an effective form of resistance in the struggle for Palestinian liberation, as they spread worldwide and beautifully and artistically articulate the love that the land of Palestine preserves, as well as the beauty in the struggle and life that flourishes within the remaining territories of the West Bank and Gaza. A tactic attempted by the Israeli occupation to erase Palestinian identity has been resisted and refused by Palestinians since the first attempt in 1948. My first example of resistance and art by literature comes from the late Palestinian national poet Mahmoud Darwish from his Earth poem. And they searched his chest, but could only find his heart. And they searched his heart, but could only find his people. And they searched his voice, but could only find his grief. And they searched his grief, but could only find his prison. And they searched his prison, but could only see themselves in chains. The beauty of this poem is that it can be interpreted by any person in a different way. It could apply to someone struggling with mental health, perhaps a person who is wrongfully accused, or a people in a similar situation to Palestine who live for their country and have to fight for their future. That takes me to my first point of art, specifically literature, being the most effective way to send a message without obviously pushing political content. This gentle way of exposing oppression is productive because it eases the audience into the harsh reality that Palestinians live in under occupation. The world has become numb and almost bored of the suffering of the Arab world. Darwish's poems allows the readers to write their own narrative and meaning to the words of the poem, building an emotional connection from reader to writer, so that when the reader is exposed to or fully understands that the message is centered around Palestinian resistance, they would be more appreciative and likely show more interest or care in the matter, because it now also has meaning and significance to them. An example of a more upfront and confrontational position in literature is demonstrated beautifully by Palestinian civil engineer Marwan Makhoul, who writes poetry and speaks to identity politics. In order for me to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds. And in order for me to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent. This take on politically engaged poetry is disruptive in the scene of what some would call peaceful poetry. Like Darwish's poem, this piece isn't written specifically to Palestinian oppression. Though it's not a poem that leaves much room for interpretation, its imagery employs the reader's emotional connection to the piece. Because the poem doesn't directly mention or target the occupation, any questions of its sincere cry for help would be invalid, because the poem, after all, is just composed of one simple thought, one simple statement. The balance of direct resistance and a more subtle negotiation for peace is what makes the poetic Palestinian resistance so deep and complex. The factor of love that Palestinians have for one another and their land is often written beautifully and well known around the world. Mahmoud Darwish's poems about his Israeli lover are artistically crafted and articulate the pain and passion that people in love feel. Ghassan Kanafani, who was a prominent figure in the resistance until he was assassinated in 1972, led the Palestinian Liberation Organization, as well as a Marxist socialist group called Popular Front of Liberation for Palestine. Both of these groups were huge in combating Israeli oppression, which made him a high-profile target to the occupation. His multiple novels, as well as other publications, are studied and well known around the Arab world because of his profound ability to communicate and generate deep emotional connection to his land and to the liberation of Palestine. One of his most well-known quotes speaks to the power that's held in his people's hearts. Everything in this world can be robbed and stolen, except for one thing. This one thing is love that emanates from a human being toward a solid commitment or to a connection or a cause. Palestinian literature, as shown, is rhetorically effective in spreading and representing the truth of the struggle for liberation from Palestinian occupation. By not directly mentioning that the work is centered around Palestinian resistance, it spreads to different corners of the world that would otherwise be uninterested. The mission of Palestinians is to fight oppression and become a sovereign and internationally recognized country to a land they claim has always been theirs. The issue is debated heavily by politicians and historians. The artistic form of resistance by literature builds an appeal to the humanitarian aspect of the crisis. It allows people to detach from the political biases they may have and understand the emotional impact of living in Palestine as well as living as a refugee away from home. Thank you.